Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I hope you're doing well. My name is Eric and I'm glad you could join us. What I wanted to show you was a little behind the scenes of what it's like when we experiment with food. And we do a lot of experimentation. Some of it works, a lot of it doesn't. So sit back, relax, enjoy the video as you watch me go through the process of dry curing meats in non-conventional methods. And at the end of this video, we're gonna taste the ones that we can, and I'll share with you my thoughts. Let's get started.
The first thing we need is a cured pork loin, and that's what I've got right here. If you want to see the actual recipe for this Spanish Lomo that I'm holding, check out the video suggestion at the end of this video. It's a great charcuterie for beginners. So we've got our cured pork loin. We're going to set that to the side. Next, we need some nori or seaweed paper, also known as sushi paper. We're also going to be using rice paper. So this particular rice paper is for spring rolls that are deep fried. And then finally, we need some bacon grease. Now, bacon grease alone won't work. It doesn't allow the loin to breathe. So we're going to mix that with some rice flour. And when you mix these two together, it's called sunya. And those are the three ways we're going to be dry curing this pork loin to see which one works the best. To get our sunya ready, we're just going to mix equal parts rice flour to bacon grease. Now, normally lard is used as bacon grease is a little soft, but I had some on hand and I thought, you know what, it might impart somewhat of a nice smoky flavor or something. So anyway, once you mix the rice flour and the fat together, it's going to form somewhat of a putty, just like that. We're going to set that to the side and let's go ahead and prepare our loin. The reason I chose the pork loin for this project is because it is a very unforgiving cut to dry cure. It's very lean, and unlike the pancetta or the copa, there's no fat to really slow down the drying process. And so when we put this into our home refrigerator, which is low humidity, a lot of airflow, we're basically putting it under the most extreme circumstances. So to make this challenge even more difficult, I'm going to remove the fat cap. So we have 100% lean meat, which will expose any problems in our experimental methods, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So we have our cured pork loin. There's no fat on it. I'm going to go ahead and divide that up into 3 pieces. One will be for the rice paper, one will be for the nori sheet, and then the other one will be for the bacon fat. All right, so the first way we're going to dry cure this is rice paper. We're just going to put a sheet of rice paper into some hot water for about 10 or 15 seconds. And this process actually happens very quickly. Once the rice paper is pliable, we're going to pull it out of that hot water, and then we're going to wrap our pork loin in it. Once the loin has been wrapped, we're just going to weigh it and then set that to the side. Next, we're going to be using nori paper. Now, this is your typical sushi paper, and I did find that this particular paper is incredibly fragile. So what I ended up doing was take some warm water, and I'm going to dip 2 sheets of nori paper, both front and back, and set that to the side. I'm just barely wetting it, and then same thing again, I'm going to dip 2 more sheets in there, front and back, and I figured that that would be sufficient to get it to stick to the meat. Next, we need to overlap those 2 pieces so that that pork loin can fit comfortably right in the middle, as those nori sheets aren't very large. And I'm going to take that pork loin and just dampen it slightly. I'm just going to make sure that the exterior part of it's wet, and I think that'll help it stick as well. And now finally, we're going to be applying our sunya layer. This is our bacon fat and our rice flour. And this is actually a little softer than a typical sunya because we are using bacon fat instead of lard, but I'm just going to go ahead and smear it on entirely. I want to make sure that the whole thing is covered. Once it's completely coated, I am also going to weigh it, and then I'm going to put this on a drying rack to begin the drying process. Here's our 3 samples. We've got the rice paper loin, the seaweed loin, and our bacon fat and rice flour loin. And I'm just going to take that tray and put it in my home refrigerator. I'm using a standard kitchen refrigerator. This is where I keep my milk and butter and eggs and cheese and all that stuff. So nothing special about the refrigerator. And this is what our sample looks like 30 days later. And it actually looks like we got some nice drying from our rice paper and our nori sheet. Notice the size difference between the nori and the bacon fat loin. the bacon fat loin still seems relatively large. The rice paper loin feels nice and firm. The nori loin also feels nice and firm. And the bacon fat loin actually feels relatively soft. And so, one thing I do want to mention is that a few days into the process, I actually changed the sheet. This is the one we started off with. I noticed that it started cracking and it didn't adhere to the loin. And so I changed it to this rice paper used for non-fried spring rolls, and I noticed that it adhered to the loin better than the one used for fried spring rolls. So that was really the only change that we made. Instead of using one of those papers, we did end up using two, and I'm glad we did because it did work a whole lot better. As you can see, it adhered to the meat better. It shrunk with the meat, which is absolutely critical because if your wrapping starts to crack, it'll expose the muscle to the elements. That's that low humidity, that high airflow, and it will begin to dry very unevenly. We certainly don't want that. And so this actually adhered much better than I thought. And some of the rice paper was a little challenging to get off. So I'm just going to put that into some cool water, let it soak for a minute while we look at the nori loin. And the nori loin looks good. It's nice and firm. When I go to peel it off, it's also adhered really well to the meat. It shrunk with the meat. And this is actually even more challenging to get off than the rice paper, as you can see. I mean, it's almost like a sticky glue. So let me just go ahead and finish taking off the rice paper, and that looks absolutely perfect. We're going to set that to the side and do the same thing with the nori loin because by itself, that seaweed paper was just not going to come off. So I'm just going to end up scraping the entire thing once it's been softened in some cool water. All right, 2 down and 1 to go. Let's take a look at our bacon fat and rice flour. And this looks like it did not shrink whatsoever. Now, I knew that this method was going to be a lot slower, but I honestly thought that given 30 days, we were going to see somewhat of a significant difference, and we actually didn't. Within 30 days, the bacon fat rice flour covered loin only lost about 4 grams, so it's still raw. Now, there's a lot of really unique and interesting smells coming from our 3 samples. Let's just go ahead and give them a center cut. And then we'll slice the ones that are edible and give those a little taste. Here's our first sample. This is the rice paper loin. Nice color. It's nice springy. It feels like it has the right density. And so far, so good. Let's go ahead and cut into our nori loin. And the nori loin looks a little darker around the outside, and that could have pulled some of that dark color from the sushi paper. It does have the right density, the right bounciness, and I would consider the rice paper and the sushi paper samples to be edible. Let's cut into our last sample, and that's completely raw. So this basically just aged for 30 days in our refrigerator. I'm going to set that one to the side. I'll probably cook it up and eat it later. But for right now, we're just going to slice up the nori loin, which is this one, and the rice paper loin, and we're going to see how they did and how they taste.
Okay, let's start with the lomo that we dry cured in the rice paper. And what I'm going to do is inspect it, and then I'm going to share my thoughts with you, take you through the process, and then we'll taste it and let you know how it tastes. And the first thing I'll always look at is, did it dry evenly? Now remember, we chose the lomo because it's the most unforgiving of whole muscles that you could possibly do. If there's going to be a problem in the method, it's going to reveal itself in this particular cut. And we took all the fat off, so this thing had no chance. And as I'm looking at this thing, it dried beautifully. If I wanted to be hypercritical about the way that it dried, there's a very thin line, about 1 millimeter thick across the top and this side, that looks like it dried a little bit faster. But truth be told, this sat in the refrigerator for 1 month. If there was a problem with the rice paper, that line should have been a whole lot bigger. We should have had some sort of a dry ring, maybe even case hardening. All right, so let's look at the smell. The smell of the Spanish Lomo smells exactly the way that it should. I mean, you've got that dry cured smell. It smells slightly aged, and you've got the nice seasonings coming from it. And as far as the texture goes, the texture looks incredibly tender. So I'm just going to pull it apart like this and see what it looks like. Oh, that looks great. Let's pull this apart. Very, very tender. So I'm very pleased to see that. And let's just go ahead and give it a taste and see what it's all about. Okay. I'm not getting any refrigerator flavors, and I'm not getting any additional flavor. So the rice paper was pretty neutral. It didn't impart a flavor to the Lomo. What I'm getting is that dry cured Spanish Lomo and all the flavors that it brings with it. All right, I like that. That's encouraging. So that's the rice paper Lomo. All right, let's take a look at the Spanish Lomo that we wrapped in the sushi paper, the seaweed paper. We're going to do the same thing. You know, if I want to be hypercritical, there is a slight dry line across the top and on the edge. This dry line, though, is a little bit thicker than the one with the rice paper. This looks like it's about 2, maybe 3 millimeters thick on the top section, 2 millimeters thick on the side section. But realistically, it's very difficult to point them out. Can you notice the difference? This is the sushi. This is the rice paper. All right, they both look pretty similar. It doesn't surprise me, though, that this has a slightly thicker dry line because it dried a little bit faster. It got to its target weight about 6 days before the rice paper. So the rice paper actually took a little bit longer, which is a good thing. So as far as how it dried, I think I'm pleasantly surprised, actually. So let's go ahead and give it a smell. Ooh. Okay. This definitely smells different than the one with the rice paper. I'm getting more of that sushi paper smell. I'm getting more of that seaweed element. It's pretty overpowering, too. I'm not getting a lot of that Spanish Lomo spices, although I do get that dry cured scent. I mean, I'm getting a lot of the sushi paper, so let's just go ahead and tear this open and look at the texture. Texture looks good. It looks about the same as the one with the rice paper. As I pull it apart, it looks pretty tender. Let's see this. Oh, that looks great. Okay, let's just give it a taste. Okay, interesting results. The one with the seaweed paper actually took on a lot of that seaweed flavor. And the seaweed flavor is actually not very subtle. It's pretty pronounced. Matter of fact, it's overwhelming the flavor of the Spanish Lomo itself. So very interesting results between the seaweed paper and the rice paper. I am not ready to endorse either one of these methods, but the results are incredibly encouraging. And there you have it, a couple non-conventional methods of how we're experimenting with dry curing meats at home. And do me a favor, share this video with everyone you know. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on these methods. I honestly believe that we could revolutionize the way people dry cure meats at home safely. And so I'm counting on you to help me do that. Thanks for watching this kind of behind the scenes video. If you like this video and found it entertaining, a great big thumbs up would be helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And if this is the first video that you've seen from our channel, take a moment and click that subscribe button and that notification bell. We post videos every week, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.